know kind of who we have in the room. So do we have students? I know we have Bridges students, because those are my students. There's some students from Kerr. How many Kerr? Okay, we have Kerr students. Do we have anybody from Honors College that's a URF? Okay, good. And then any HHMI students? PRISM students? SPMS students? Okay. So who isn't affiliated with the program but is doing undergraduate research? What are you doing undergraduate research in?
In mass communications, I was just helping. I just started.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I know. Dr. What's his name?
Dr. Bradley.
Dr. Bradley.
Yeah.
Right. As I've met him, but I couldn't remember his name. And the students last night said, and I couldn't remember. So I know he's been sending students over. That's great. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jacyln, Canas, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Toxicology. And I work a lot with undergraduates. I was an undergraduate researcher at one point. So in giving this presentation, I come at it from a few different angles, as having been in your shoes and being an undergraduate researcher. Is everybody here involved in undergraduate research or going to be at some point? Okay. I also have had undergraduate researchers in my own laboratory, so I know what it's like to have been, or to be a mentor of an undergraduate research mentor, or an undergraduate researcher. And then I also am the director of a program for underrepresented students at community colleges, or I should say one community college, South Plains College. I run their program, and they actually do an undergraduate research experience at Texas Tech. So I actually hear from students who have undergraduate research mentors and the issues that they have. I'm also on the advisory council for the Center for Undergraduate Research, and so I come at this presentation from all sorts of angles, and like to think that I have at least some credibility in talking about what we're going to talk about today. So what we're going to actually talk about today, and it will be a little interactive, so I'm okay with awkward silences and standing here until somebody answers, just so you know. But what we're going to talk about today is professors are people too, well kinda, okay? So to demystify a little bit what a professor is, talk about what a mentor is, okay? How many of you actually have a mentor, whether it's just a regular, life type mentor, or like a professor, or an actual research mentor? Everybody in here? Okay, so you have people to put in mind when talking about what we're going to talk about today, and then give you some tips on how to be more effectively mentored, which may sound weird, right? Like why you need to be trained on how to be mentored, but we're going to give you some tips as to how you might help improve that mentor-mentee relationship, because it is a two-way street, okay? And so we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to, towards the end, we're going to talk about some issues that have been raised through not only my program, but like through the Center for Undergraduate Research and students that are actively doing undergraduate research, and some questions that they've had for us, and then we'll open it up for discussion, okay? So with that, you'll move me to the next slide. Okay, so what is a mentor? Who can tell me what a mentor is?
Someone you look up to.
Someone you look up to. What else?
Somebody who can give you advice.
Somebody who can give you advice. What else?
Somebody who can guide you.
Somebody who can guide you. What else? What about if it's a research mentor?
Someone who inspires you.
Someone
shows
who
you the way.
inspires you and shows you the way. What else do we have? What comes to mind when you think
Helps
of
develop like research techniques.
Okay, helps to develop research techniques. Good. What else? What about this side of the room? You guys are quiet. What do you think of as a mentor?
It's somebody that you have an active relationship with, rather than just like a one-time question or advice.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you have it. So I like the idea of the relationship, because it is a relationship, okay, between two people. That's key. Anything else? Okay, well, let's look at what an official dictionary type definition is. So it's an experienced advisor and supporter, somebody usually older and more experienced who provides advice and support to and watches over and fosters the progress of a younger, less experienced person, okay? Or the next one, a mentor, at least in Homer's Odyssey, As a friend whom Odysseus left in charge of the household while he was in Troy, and who was the teacher and protector of Telemachus. Did I get that right this time?
Pretty close.
Dang, I haven't read this. Odysseus' son. And then, in other words, things like an advisor, a counselor, a guide, a tutor, a teacher, a guru, or a merchant of hope. Okay? So those are some official definitions. Next slide, please. So why do you guys think that you need or should you want a mentor?
Because we don't really know what we're doing on our own, and
Okay.
at least in the field of research, we don't know where to get started or
Yeah,
how to get started.
perfect. What else?
If we have questions.
If you have
If
questions.
we come across any problems or questions, maybe somebody help us guide us through those issues.
Yeah, exactly. What else?
Listen to our problems.
Somebody to listen
Yeah,
to your
yeah.
problems, yeah. What else? Nothing?
It gives you somebody who's going to help you stay on the right track and continue moving forward.
Okay, good. That's good. All right, so let's see, Levi, what do we have here? All right, someone to teach you life skills, okay? Simple things like how to reply to an email properly, when to reply to an email, how to write, or how to get along with people, how to treat people. I mean, some real basic things that you don't, like nobody ever really teaches you. And so you come to college and you have some mentors and they teach you some basic life skills, okay? How to survive in the sort of real world, but to prepare you to go out into the real world, okay? Someone to turn to when you have a problem or crisis. Sometimes, and I tell students, you always, when you think you have a problem or a crisis, go to somebody older, more experienced, and talk to them about it, because you go to them, and it's really not that big of a crisis. To you it is. Seems like the world's going to end. Everything, that you hoped for was going to be, it's dashed, it's gone. But you go to a mentor, and you explain to them the situation, and they're not going to belittle you and say, oh my gosh, really, you're stressing about that? But what they are going to do is say, well, it's not as bad as you think, so here's some options, these are things you can do, and so you walk out of there feeling better. And I see it time and time again with students that I mentor, both in my Bridges program and students that come to my laboratory as undergraduate researchers, where they think something is a huge crisis and the world is about to end, and they bring it to me, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's really not that big of a deal. I don't tell them that, but I do try to put it in perspective and then say, okay, so let's see how we can get past this crisis, how we can get past this problem, okay? And that's what a mentor can do for you. Encourage you when times get tough. Especially if you're doing research, there are times where you're going to run up against a roadblock of some sort. A piece of equipment isn't working. You can't figure out how to solve the problem you're working on. You don't know, you're at a point where you don't know what the next step should be. That's where a mentor, a research mentor can come in and, you can tell them, this is what I've done to this point. I'm lost now. Please help. And that's where they'll provide you some guidance. Can advise you on career and life decisions, right? Because you come to college and you think you know what you want to do because you've heard about these certain professions, right? You've seen a TV show, you know somebody who knows somebody who's one of these or whatever. But then you come to the university, you go start taking classes, and then you start to think, well, what am I going to do next? How can I even use this degree if I don't do something like go to law school or go to medical school? And so somebody who's a mentor, whether it's a research mentor or just a life mentor, can sit down and talk with you, especially if it's a professor in your discipline that can say, hey, these are the possible jobs that you could get. These are, if you want to do this, you need to go to graduate school. If you, or no, you'll be fine with just a bachelor's degree, you can go on and do these things, okay? So they can really give you some advice on career and life decisions. And then they can help to really open doors to other opportunities. So don't underestimate the power of a mentor, because once they get to know you well, they know your interests, they know what your goals may be, and so, we get emails all the time that have, here's an opportunity for this, an opportunity for that. You might have students that fit this, fit that. And so what we do is we send it on to you guys as our mentees, as our proteges, and say, hey, here's a great opportunity for you, I think you'd be competitive, apply for it, I'll write you a letter. And you find out about things that you would have never known about. You never know if your mentor is going to be somebody who knows somebody that's going to get you a job, okay? Because a lot about getting jobs is, yeah, you have to know the technical aspects of things, but you also need to know people sometimes to get a job. And so you never know what a mentor will do for you or what kinds of doors they will open, okay? So the better you get to know your mentors, the more you open up to them, the more they can help you in this regard, okay? Okay, so somebody already had said this about a research mentor. They show you basically the ropes of how to conduct research. And we understand when you come to us as undergrads that you've never done undergraduate research, so we're not expecting you to be an expert in anything. And we know that you're going to make mistakes and all sorts of things, but these are the people who can really show you how the research is done in your field. You know, what are the journals you need to be looking at? What are the conferences you need to be going to? What graduate schools have the best programs and what you want to do and where you should go? And they know people all around the country, and so they can kind of help you navigate that whole process. And then this is a real big one, showing you the ropes of how to become a professional in your particular field. So teaching you how to write, you know, scientifically or within your own discipline, how to correspond with people. I have students all the time. I tell them, well, you need to email this faculty member. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to say? And so I tell them, say, you know, hi, Dr. So-and-so, and walk them through the process, okay? That's what a research mentor can do for you. They can help to show you the ropes of how to become a professional. You know, what you're supposed to dress like when you go to a conference. They take you to a conference, introduce you to people, and teach you some basic skills that you'll need to be successful as a professional. And these are two really big things that research mentors are supposed to help you to do. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Levi.
So just to introduce myself real quickly, many of you already know me, but my name is Levi Johnson. I'm the Assistant Coordinator of STEM Outreach at Texas Tech. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. So I'm involved because of an interest in those areas, but I absolutely believe in the importance of all of this stuff for you regardless of what major you're in. But as part of working in a faculty mentor, undergraduate researcher, or undergraduate mentee kind of a relationship, whether that's a research relationship or maybe something that's developed a little more organically and is simply someone you go to it for advice and those kinds of things, there's some things that you want to keep in mind when you're interacting with these faculty members. And in general, my recommendation to you is to remember that they're people and that they have lives. And so I wanted to give you guys just a little bit of a look into the lives of a couple of our professors that work really extensively with undergraduate researchers. Our first one, I was able to rope our presenter into giving me a look at her day. So Dr. Canas has traveled all over the world. She has gotten to do some really incredible things, and she's gotten to hang out with koalas, which is something that I'm extremely jealous of. But let's just kind of take a look at what her morning looks like. So 6:30 a.m. she wakes up, morning routine. She exercises, breakfast. She likes to watch the Today Show. Pretty normal, at least in my experience. By 8:30 she's in her office and she's working on emails. And trust me, I've seen her email inbox before, and that's not just a blow-off chunk of time. She works extensively with a number of outreach initiatives and some massive grants, and a lot of these different things generate a lot of need for correspondence, both internally at Texas Tech and then externally with different advisory panels and committees, and I'm constantly bothering her for things, and so this time in her office is absolutely essential. But by 9 she's already in the classroom teaching, and then from there she goes back to her office for a chunk of time. And same thing, she's working on everything from checking her email to writing new grants. She's working on her own research, letters of recommendation for students, both undergraduate and graduate. Something to keep in mind is that you're not the only students that interact with the professors that you see every day. In fact, a lot of their time is consumed working with graduate students in many cases. And so it's important for you to keep in mind the context in which you're working with these faculty mentors, because it really can inform the way that you should kind of approach different things. She does take a break for lunch, which I'm proud of her for. And then she's back in her office by 1. At 5, she's kind of shutting down and heads home for dinner. And then for her evenings, she claims that she spends it with family, friends, TV errands, and occasionally checks email. I know that a lot of times she ends up doing additional work on our different grant programs, and lots of report writing and those kinds of things happen in the evenings as well, unfortunately. But she is what I would describe as having a balanced life. We're going to look at a little more unbalanced one here in a minute. And so she's in bed by 10, hopefully. And so that's kind of a typical look at her day. On her weekends, she likes to go to sporting events. She likes to travel, and then she'll check out movies. Where are some places that you've gotten to travel to?
I've gone to Australia, Europe, a few times, and then I've gone to Belize. I think that's. China.
Were any of those for conferences or research?
Yes, Australia was for conference. The first time I went to Europe was for conference, then I went for leisure 2 times, and China was just fun.
Okay. So one of the things I'd like to encourage you, if you're looking at attending graduate school and considering going after a PhD and being in a research field, one of the neat perks of that kind of a job is that a lot of times you get to travel to some really unique places to either give your research or to hear other people's research. And so it's kind of a neat thing to get to kind of see the world as a part of all that, and then to get to do it with groups of people that have similar interests to you. And so it's kind of a neat lifestyle in my opinion. But so that's Dr. Canas, pretty balanced in my opinion. Now let's look at somebody else. So some of you may know this gentleman. Dr. Jerry Dwyer's an associate professor in the math department. He's actually my boss. He's the coordinator, so I'm the assistant coordinator for STEM outreach. But he is what we call principal investigator on a number of our big outreach grants here at Texas Tech through the National Science Foundation. He also collaborates closely with Dr. Canas on some stuff with the National, it's NIH, what is it, National Institutes of Health? Mm-hmm. And so he closely works with a number of different faculty members from across campus, and it's kind of crazy. So let's look at his day. By 6 a.m. he's out running, and he's running for 2 hours. He's a marathon runner and actually trains a number of the competitive runners here in Lubbock. And so that's a 2-hour solid run, and he's not done for the day. He's got breakfast, and then by 9 he's traditionally working on his emails and his grant work. At 10 he holds his office hours for his students, both undergraduate and graduate, to come by and ask questions about what's going on in class. I mean, that's pretty typical, I hope, for your experiences that professors will have their office hours. What's kind of unique is that after he teaches and then goes back and meets with his graduate student researchers, he's not even close to halfway done with his day. In the afternoon, he goes out for another workout. Typically, he'll ride his bicycle for several miles, and then try to be back in his office around 2 to meet with graduate students. As a part-time graduate student that has worked with Dr. Dwyer, I would recommend that you shoot for a morning meeting because he tends to smell better than in the afternoon. But 3 p.m. He's attending a seminar. 4 p.m. it's back to report writing or grant writing, and then he's got church at 5, dinner at 6. I think this is a Wednesday. His evening, he's now working on grant work, and also a lot of times his evenings he's working on personal things. He does a lot of outreach with African countries. He actually was in Kenya not too long ago doing a teacher exchange program where he worked with schools there to try to improve their math curriculum, kind of trying to break the cycle of poverty and some things in some of those places. And so he's done some really unique work outside of the U.S. As a part of that. But he does his own research in math, separate from the different studies we have to do for the various grants that he's got. And then at 9 p.m. you can often find him at J&B Coffee working with more students on different research projects or homework or whatever. And then at about 11 p.m. he's home and he's answering the last round of emails for the day. And then he claims to be in bed at midnight, but I've gotten lots of emails from him at about 3 a.m. So this is what I would call more of an unbalanced schedule. And the only reason I show these to you and kind of create this dichotomy is to offer up to you that you don't have any idea what kind of person or schedule or whatever you're dealing with until you get to know the professor that you're working with as a person and find out what their interests are and what their hobbies are and what motivates them. Until you get to know Dr. Dwyer and you understand how passionate he is about running, it's very hard to put the rest of what he is up to in a day in context. Because at whatever it was, 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. when it's time for his afternoon run or bike, he's not in his office, you can't find him, he will not schedule a meeting with you at that time. Don't get your feelings hurt, that's just the way it is. And so if you understand that about him, it's a lot easier to work with him in a research situation or in an academic mentorship kind of relationship. And like Dr. Canas mentioned, I can't emphasize enough that all of this is about building a relationship. In a minute, we're going to look at some of the challenges that students have reported back to us about these kinds of mentorship relationships. And most of them can be solved simply by working to develop a positive personal relationship with your faculty mentor. And then that helps you navigate kind of the other weird stuff that may come up from time to time. So now I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Canas, and we're going to look at some tips for you guys on being effectively mentored.
Okay. Thank you, Levi. So we can put the first one. Okay. So first of all, you need to know that you do have a voice. You guys, yes, you're undergrads, but you're part of a research team, okay? Or even if you're just working with your faculty mentor, you are not just an undergrad. I've heard that from students before. You know, you wouldn't be part of something like a research project if you weren't important. So don't feel like you're just the, you know, low man on the totem pole. You are, yes, you're an undergraduate, but you do have a voice and you do have something to bring to the table. I mean, I've learned things from my undergraduate researchers, or they've discovered things or developed methods that my lab still uses today, even though they've gone on to graduate school. Okay, so know that you have a voice. We hear that from students. And so I don't want to ever hear anybody say, well, I'm just an undergrad. You actually have a role and an important one, okay? As Levi mentioned, get to know your mentor. The more you get to know them, the more rewarding it is both for you and your mentor to be in that mentoring relationship, okay? It'll also give you clues as to when best to get a hold of your mentor. Like, you know that somebody checks emails in the morning, well then you know you want to have your email in at night so that in the morning you'll get your reply because you want to have a meeting. If your mentor, you know that they like to text or they're okay with texting, then you can text them and set up a meeting for the next day. I mean, it's all about getting to know your mentor as a person. The more you know that, I think the more effective you'll get out of, the more effective mentoring you'll get out of that relationship, okay? And then you need to be proactive, because as faculty members, you saw our days, and our days are really highly unstructured for the most part, even though we put, some times on there, because it's kind of dynamic. One day we could be in our office all day, the next day we might be in meetings, solid from hour to hour throughout the entire day. And so we are busy, and we wear lots of different hats. We've got lots of responsibilities between teaching, service, research, mentoring people, writing grants, writing manuscripts and papers. I mean, we have a lot to do. And so in order for you to get the most out of your relationship with your mentor, you need to be proactive and be the ones emailing them repeatedly, right? Because you didn't get a response the first time. Stopping by their office, calling them, and asking for a meeting. Don't wait for your mentor to come by and say, hey, how's everything going? Establish a meeting with them, even if it's weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is. But you'll get more out of it if you are proactive and you're the one doing the emailing and not just waiting for us to come to you. Because it's not that we don't want to help you, because we wouldn't have agreed to be your mentor in the first place. It's just that we are really busy, and so it's not like we really forget about you, but we have all these things on our plate. So if you're the one driving the relationship and driving that interaction, you're going to get way more out of it than if you just wait on us. Okay, that's really the bottom line. So ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Trust me, we've heard everything, and obviously if the person's told you like 20 times and then you're asking again, well then we're going to get frustrated with you. But we all know that you're not an expert in what we're doing. And so there's no such thing as a dumb question. We'd rather you ask. I tell my students, I'd rather you ask than you break an expensive piece of equipment, or you mess up a round of samples so that we're set back 3 months now from where we could be. So there's no such thing as a dumb question, and that goes not only in the research realm, but things like, something as simple like, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life, what should I do? I mean, there's really no such thing as a dumb question, okay? So please ask. This one's really important. Ask your mentor for clear expectations so everybody's on the same page. It's really important, I think, when you first start, especially if you're doing undergraduate research, start working with somebody, ask for some clear expectations. How many hours do they expect you to be there? What do they hope that they can, you know, the two of you can get out of you being an undergraduate researcher in their lab or in their research program, okay? And so just make sure that you ask them, you know, how often do they want you to check in with them? You know, just the clearer the expectations are, I think the easier, so that they're not thinking, well, they're not coming and talking to me, so everything must be okay. Or they're not coming and talking to me, so they must be slackers and not doing their job. Or, you know, just set clear expectations, and it'll make it a lot easier for both you and your mentor. And then, this is a big one, ask your mentor how he or she likes to communicate. Do they prefer email? Do they prefer phone? Do they prefer in person? Do they prefer that you text them? Is it okay to text them? And don't assume that because somebody's old, okay, that be like, well, they can't possibly text. I mean, these people, as faculty mentors or faculty members, we have families, we have children, so guess what? They probably have kids that are just a few years younger than you, and they will text. So don't assume, don't, you know, be biased and say, well, he's an old guy, he doesn't text. Ask him, because he may be all about texting, and you may be able to get a hold of him much quicker and be like, hey, are you in your office? Can I stop by? Okay, so make sure that you ask, because some people may not want, even though you have their phone number, they may not text, okay? And once you know their schedule and kind of the activities that they have and what they do outside of work and those kinds of things, you'll have a better handle on too, like when you can text or call them. You know, for Dr. Driver, you could go to like J&B and find him, okay, at 9 o'clock at night. If you try to find me at J&B at 9 o'clock at night on a weekday, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at home and preferably not doing anything related to work. And I tell my students, if they have an emergency, you can call me, but otherwise, just wait till tomorrow. I'd rather not, you know, deal with a text at 10 p.m. at night with a crisis, unless it absolutely has to be addressed. And then, I can't stress this one on the bottom enough, with written 3 times with exclamation marks. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That means if you can't show up on, you know, you're gonna miss a meeting, you can't come to the research group meeting, you can't, you know, make it to the lab that day, you're gonna miss the deadline that he or she set, you know, you guys talked about, you have a really big test coming up, and so you'd rather not come to, you know, work on your undergraduate research project for the next 3 days because otherwise you might fail the class. I mean, the more you communicate with your mentor, the more they understand about where you're coming from. And we're human, okay? We're all human, so we understand that life happens, things go on. But if you don't communicate with us, then we automatically put you in, you're the slacker category, you know, you're lazy, you don't care. I mean, there's all sorts of things. We just make these assumptions because we have expectations of you, so when you don't show, we're just like, man, really? I mean, come on. So communicate, communicate, communicate. And we're understanding people. We know life happens. I mean, we all have our own lives. We have crises that go on. But the more open you are with your mentor and the more they know about you, the more understanding they're going to be of when you have something major going down or you're really frustrated or whatever, okay? So communicate with them. And then that leads to being respectful of your mentor's time, because you saw our schedules, we're really busy people. So if we set a meeting with you at 2 o'clock, we really want you to be there at 2 o'clock, because more than likely we've already decided that you may only need 30 minutes of our time or an hour of our time, and so we've already booked somebody else at 3. Or we've already agreed to go to some meeting at 3 o'clock. And so it helps if you're there on time. I know Dr. Dwyer mentioned that you know, if the meeting's at 2, don't show up at like 1:30 or 1:40, because he might already be meeting with another student, so you're just going to sit around and wait anyway. So you might as well just try to be there on time. And then you have to respond when your mentor emails, calls, texts you, because we are busy people, so we really would prefer that we only have to try and contact you once, instead of having to repeatedly send emails and then a text and then, but like in my Bridges program, we actually text the students to tell them that there's an email waiting, and we actually get higher responses from email if we'll actually text them to tell them to go check their email. Okay, and it sounds weird, but it works. So please respond when your mentor tries to contact you, because that that will make them a happier person and make their lives a lot easier if they don't have to follow up with you 20 times. And then keep your mentor informed if you can't make a meeting. You know, we know stuff comes up, you get a flat tire, you're sick, just let us know. And that way, you know, we know you're not just blowing us off or blowing off our research project or whatever. Having said that we're really busy, we really can be forced to make time. You just have to bug us for it, okay? And I know a lot of my colleagues, they'll drop whatever they're doing to work with students, to help students, as long as they're not up against a major deadline. But really, if you bug us, we're gonna make the time, because we've already agreed to be your mentor. That means we're invested in you. We want you to succeed. We want to help you in however we can. It's just we get really bogged down with all our day-to-day stuff that we may not do our best. But if you bug us, and it's not really bugging us, but if you come to us and send emails and all this and want to have meetings and such, we're going to make the time to do it, okay? And then really be patient with us. We really do want to help you, but you have to remember we're human and we've got all sorts of responsibilities that go beyond just being your mentor. So be patient with us. We don't know everything and we do make mistakes, so be patient. And then remember that we are human. So talk to them about non-professional, non-research related things. Ask them what kind of TV shows do they watch, what kind of movies do they watch, what kind of music do they listen to, what do they like sports. And you'll see it is a relationship, and if you get to know them better, it's so much easier to write a letter of recommendation for a student that I know than a student that I don't know. And even ones that have been working with me. The more I know you, the easier it is to write a letter of recommendation, and that's going to be across the board for anybody. But we like talking. I mean, we sit around and we talk with our colleagues. We don't just sit there and talk about our discipline and what our research is. We sit there and we talk about the latest football game and why the Big 12 is falling apart, and what the latest episode of, I don't know, trying to think of one that a lot of us watch. But I can't think of it right now. But we sit around and we talk about the latest episode that we just saw of, like, something like Grey's Anatomy. I mean, come on. We're human. We watch TV. So talk to your mentors about that kind of stuff. And you'd be surprised. It may seem awkward at first, but we all like to talk. So, you can pull something out of them. And you might find out that you have something in common that you would have never thought, because these people are, decades older than you or something. And then please remember to say thank you. I heard this recently at a conference that I was at, and it really struck a chord with me, because I think a lot of times, and I know I'm just as guilty of this, and I think a lot of people are, but remember to say thank you to your mentor when they send you, the opportunity to go away and study for abroad in the summer or something, or because they put you in contact with somebody, or because they wrote you a letter of recommendation for graduate school, and guess what, you got in. They really want to hear back. It's really frustrating for me when I write letters of recommendations for students, scholarships and all this stuff, and I never hear back. I really appreciate the students that will send me an email and say, thank you so much for writing that letter. I've gotten the scholarship and now I can do this because of that. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time from you to do that, but it means the world to your mentor when they're getting those updates and that thank you, because it keeps us going, and then we're going to keep doing it for future students. Okay. So what it's like to be a mentor, it's probably the most rewarding thing that I do in my job. Some of the other stuff I put up with, but being a mentor for undergraduate researchers, I'm the faculty advisor of Canas, I'm the director of Bridges. I deal with a lot of undergraduate researchers in different programs. Being a mentor is by far the most rewarding part of my job. Knowing that I can help, direct people where they should go after they finish as an undergraduate, giving them, life advice, whatever, helping them get over a crisis. I mean, it's really just the most rewarding part. And the people, if they've agreed to be your mentor, they're doing it because they want to. They're not getting paid to do it. They're not getting anything out of it other than they want to help train the future generation of whatever their discipline may be. And so it is, and I think for a lot of people that I talk to, it really is the most rewarding part of what we do, is working with you guys and mentoring you and seeing you succeed and go on and do big and great things. So remember the little people when you guys are all rich and famous.
Before we jump into this next section here, I know some of you came in late. before you leave, and I was going to say this because I know some people had to sing it early last night, make sure you sign in or that you had your ID scanned by me. If you're going to be here till the end, I can just scan you in then, but we just need to make sure we've got a record of everybody's attendance, and I know some of you guys kind of snuck in late, and that's absolutely fine. We're going to kind of transition to more of a discussion time, and so we'd love to get your questions, especially if there's something here that we've kind of missed that you've been kind of wondering, but these are just kind of hypothetical things that students in the past have identified as things that they had to deal with, and so we hope to offer a little bit of wisdom on handling some of these situations. So the first one is, how should I handle when my mentor regularly misses, cancels, or reschedules meetings? Does anybody have any ideas about what you could do if you're finding that you're assigned to work with this person, but it's kind of hard to track them down?
Maybe you could email them or contact them and tell them about your frustrations with them not being where they plan to be.
Okay, so kind of let them know that it's causing a problem. And any other ideas?
Yeah, just trying a different way to communicate. For example, if you're just trying to show up at like their office at a certain time and they're just never there, and try to email them or call them or something else. And if email is worth calling or something. So.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe like ask a grad student like what the professor is like, if maybe they're just extremely busy at that time or something else.
Okay.
I was gonna say, maybe take a step back and see if there's like a pattern of, am I always scheduling meetings at a certain time of the day that they just seem to always have things that come up. Maybe I need to shoot for mornings instead of afternoons. Or
It's a great idea.
Yeah, these are all good.
Anything else? So I generally like the theme of kind of get to know who you're dealing with and the context that they're working in, and then try to adjust your behavior to accommodate that. Something else to keep in mind, many of you are involved in structured programs like the Center for Undergraduate Research Scholars or PRISM or Plains Bridges, and I'm leaving a bunch out. But if you're affiliated with a structured program like that, you can use the staff or faculty facilitators for that program as a mediator a lot of times. So if you're running into something like this where you've kind of done everything you feel like you can do, then the next step I would recommend is to go talk to your program director or the person that's kind of facilitating whatever program you're involved in. If you are not in a structured program and you're just in your department, excuse me, sometimes other faculty in the department can help you kind of get a feel for what's going on and how best to proceed. So a lot of times turning to other people like graduate students or the people affiliated with the program can be valuable. Anything else on this one, Dr. Canas?
No, I think you guys were really good. I really like the idea about, voicing the frustration, because sometimes we may not realize that we've, put you off the last 3 times that we tried to meet and be like, oh man, I really did that, because you'd be surprised on how much we do in a day to day, from week to week, that we totally lose track, of what time. We lose sense of what time, how long time has lapsed, and so maybe wow, we really haven't met in 2 weeks. I'm really sorry about that, and then we make you a priority, and try to keep. I think once it's happened once, it gets a little bit better, and we realize, oh man, we've really got to do a better job, because it's our responsibility too as the mentors, but sometimes we just need to be prodded along a little bit. So I like that. I think it's good to be honest with your, because it is a relationship, and it'll only get stronger and better if you voice concerns and things like that. And remember, just because you're an undergrad doesn't mean you have that, they're far superior to you because they have this grand degree or whatever. That it doesn't matter.
So the next thing I'd like to kind of talk through is we've had some students that have raised some concern where they felt like they needed to find a new faculty mentor, or they've got a new faculty mentor identified, but making that transition, either changing projects or navigating some of that kind of awkwardness there, as far as I was working with this person, but it's now time for me to be working with somebody else. Any suggestions or ideas on how best to kind of deal with a kind of touchy situation like that?
Just know that whenever you transition, nobody does anything alike. Doesn't matter what field that they're in, they always, when you transition to a new mentor, understand that the best way to get through to them faster is to do it the way that they asked to do it. don't forget completely what the last mentor taught you. But if the new mentor says, you know, well, I don't like to do it that way, I like to put it on, 60 degrees Celsius in for this long, then you do it that way. No matter if it works for you or not, you just kind of have to change, and you have to transition yourself also.
It's an excellent
That's really
point.
good, yeah.
Any other ideas?
I think maybe because you have to let the old mentor know, you can't just disappear and fall face to earth and not show up to lab or anything. I think maybe establishing the reason that you got started anyway, maybe this new project is more in the area, and instead of, because it's kind of like you would nicely break up with somebody.
Yeah.
Kind of say, okay, this is the reason why this really isn't what I need right now, but thank you for your help. This is, whatever. But this is more in the area that I need to be.
And thank you for saying that, because that's really important. When you've invested time working with an undergraduate and then they just leave you high and dry, that leaves a really bad, bitter taste in the mentor's mouth. And I've had that happen to me, and there's no way that I would write a letter of recommendation for that person, even though they did a great job with me, the way that they left it, and they left us high and dry. We needed them to do some work. Then I had the next mentee that came along. He, realized, hey, this isn't really in line with what I'm that interested in. And so we sat down and we had a conversation. And I was like, hey, that's great. Go find what you're really interested in. And now he's happy. And that's all I want. As a mentor, that's all you want. You want your student to be happy, find what's theirs, what's right for them. And so thank you for saying that you do need to break up with them, okay, in a polite way. And you don't have to say, wow, your stuff is really boring and I really hate this. Find a nice way to say, it's just not right for me and I think I kind of want to go in a different direction. And that's all you have to, that's all you have to say. And then, and if you do that, you're gonna leave on a high note with them, okay? So you can always go back to them when you need the 3 letters of recommendation and you're like, who am I gonna get to write these? Then you can always go back to that mentor. And for that student that left, in the right manner, in the right way, I've probably written more letters of recommendation for him now that he's gone and not in my lab than when he was my own student, okay? So that's just, thank you for pointing that out. But that's really, and it is a hard thing to do, but it's the mature and the proper way to do that, because you don't want to burn a bridge, because you never know when that person's going to be on your hiring committee, on a selection committee, and this is like 10 years down the road, and they are still going to remember the way that you treated them, and that's just human nature. So you cannot afford to burn a bridge, just be like, I'm never going to be here again, I'll never see them. People move. You might be somewhere 10 years from now, and you end up in the same place, and you're like, oh man, I really shouldn't have burnt that bridge, okay?
One last thing on this point that I'd like to kind of address is that remember that you are an active participant in the relationship. And so it's not like you're just stuck at the whim of everyone else in the situation. You have to take ownership of your academic experience, of your research path, and so you're going to have to be the one that's going to ultimately make the decision in whatever situation you're in, whether you need to stick it out and just work where you're at, or whether you need to pursue something else. But in that decision, always remember to be mature, open, and to actively communicate with everyone involved so that no one ever feels like they kind of got snubbed in that process. Anything else on this before we move on to the next one? Great. So what about if you sign up for a research project and you find yourself, instead of working with the faculty mentor, actually most of your interaction is with graduate students, and so you're not actually working with the faculty member that you thought you were going to be working with. This happens a lot in science labs, where there's going to be a faculty member over the entire lab, but a lot of times undergraduates in particular are paired with graduate students or postdocs for their particular part of the project. So any ideas on how best to navigate this type of a situation?
Yeah, I think you just kind of have to look at it as an opportunity, like, because you think a lot of times, well, maybe it's like, oh, I don't have the faculty member, I just have the graduate students under them, even though you're the one of the faculty member because they're at the top. But it's kind of looking at an opportunity to learn and work with the graduate students, because that could be like the next path, like after an undergraduate career, and just they're the ones working most directly with the research and their research, and you can learn a lot from them. So,
That's great.
I have a quick question upon that question.
Sure.
I mean, it says if you do work with grad students, how would you, and that, particularly that mentor doesn't know how you work or who you are, I mean, how are you going to get that letter of recommendation? I mean, how would you get that, you know, really good recommendation, that letter of recommendation you really want? I mean, not to say that I work with a graduate student all the time, but I mean.
Sure. Dr. Canas, you want to take this one? Or you want me to?
Yeah, I think, because I've had undergrads work with my graduate students, but I think your faculty mentor actually probably knows more about you than you think they do. And they will, you know, if they're going to be writing like a letter of recommendation for you to go to graduate school, they're going to talk about how productive you were in their research group. You know, were you responsible? Did you reply to emails? Did you, you know, turn in assignments like when they were due? Did you meet major deadlines? Did you help them out with certain things? Were you a team player? I mean, because they, within a lab especially, and within any research group, especially if you're working in some sort of tiered system, there's going to be dialogue between the faculty member and the graduate student. So even though you may not see the faculty member directly, the faculty member maybe see like, hey, how's Carlos doing? Asking the graduate student because you're not around at that point. Or they're meeting with them and be like, hey, is everything going okay with Carlos? And yeah, they're like, hey, yeah, he's a rock star. He, you know, does everything I ask him to or whatever. And so we're able to actually, even though we may not work with you directly, one-on-one all the time, we've kind of got our little, you know, feelers out there. And then how you do things like you turn in posters and how you write. And because when you're writing a thing, like a letter of recommendation for graduate school or even for a job, you're really talking about how reliable that person is, you know, the things that they want to know. How significant of a project did you work on? So they know what kind of project you're working on. So they can say, oh, it was a really vital part of my research program that this, you know, particular student worked on. So don't worry too much if you're not working directly with them. You definitely still want to try to get the letter from the faculty member over the graduate student any day.
One other thing to keep in mind is that if you are going into some kind of a situation and part of, in the back of your mind, what you're thinking is, I'm going to need a strong letter of recommendation at the end of this process, be sure to set that expectation with the faculty mentor up front. Go meet with them and say, what do I need to do in order for you to be able to give me a strong recommendation? Here are my goals, and sometimes it may turn out that that's not the best fit for you to get what you need based on where you're wanting to end up. But if you're clear about that at the front, then you're not going to waste a bunch of time and then be surprised when you don't get the outcome that you need at the end of it. And so, again, a lot of this simply boils down to just communication, but that idea of setting expectations on the front end, and that can feel a little bit awkward, I know. But my recommendation is to always be very open about kind of what you're here to do and where you'd like to be, and I think faculty mentors will respect that, and a lot of times you're going to see a better outcome from there. Anything else on this one? Great, we've been getting great comments.
Yeah, these are good.
So we've had students report that they feel like they're not really part of the team, like they've got kind of their own little thing that they're working on, but it turns out that they don't feel like that's a very important part of the bigger project, or maybe they're not getting as much attention as they feel like they need or they want. Anything to kind of address this?
Be proactive.
Sure.
Kind of going back to the transition to a new mentor, the one that I started out was, I started out in animal care, and it was for the same professor, and it was horrible. It still is horrible, but I just did, what he wanted me to do, and I was always on time, and obviously it's not hard for me because I have a little better understanding, and plus me and my mentor are about the same age, so. But what I did is every time I wanted to move up, I tried to find somebody that could replace me in that area that I could give a good recommendation to. And as he put somebody else in that spot, he would give me a new project. And every time I moved up, I kind of increased my worth. But I never really asked for more responsibility. I just always tried to do that one spot that he gave me as best as I could. And just along the time, gradually you become, the grad students go to depend on you. the doctor goes to depend on you, the professor, I mean, once they start depending on you, you have to keep that up. That's a hard part. Because if you let that down, it only takes about one semester to ruin that whole thing you've built. But once you get in there, and I mean, you might be cleaning beakers for a whole semester, but you clean beakers the best that you can.
Yeah, I like that because we don't assign things to people that were working with us if we don't find at least some value in it. We really don't. And so we think that there's some value in you working on whatever you're working on, and you may feel like, oh man, I have to do the same thing over and over. But eventually we're going to move you on to some other things. But being proactive and doing the best that you can at what you're being given to do, you'd be surprised at how just doing really well at the one thing you're being given to do starts to translate into, okay, well, they're really good at that, so let's try them on this next step. And so now they can do step 1 and step 2 together. And then before you know it, like what happened to me, you have all those graduate students in your lab graduating when I was an undergrad. And now all of a sudden, I was the most senior person my senior year as an undergrad in the laboratory. And there's all these new graduate students coming in, and guess who was training them? It was all me. And that was a little bit daunting when the professor was like, so in the lab meeting, I happened to mention that, you know, because so-and-so are gone now, that I expected everybody to pick up the slack and whatever. And he's telling me later, so I really meant you because you're the one that knows everything. And I was like, but I'm a senior undergrad, what do you mean? And so eventually, you know, you build that level of responsibility. And if you do really well at the one thing you're being given to do, we trust that we, you know, can train you to do the next thing and the thing after that. And before you know it, you might have your own small project that is really all of the steps together. Okay, so just be patient. And especially I know for those of you that are really like go-getters and all that, it can be really frustrating when you're being told, well, just keep doing that, you're doing really good, just keep doing that, and you're like, but I want to do more. It'll come. So you just have to be a little patient.
Again, the other thing to keep in mind is if the situation has somehow turned negative, then that's where you would need to kind of revert to some of the other stuff we talked about, either going and talking to someone as a mediator or to explore other options. So we certainly don't want to discredit or devalue the idea that there may be a student that's in a lab and they really aren't valued and they're really not where they're supposed to be. But that's part of that expectations and the communication and some of those things. So keep that in mind.
And don't be afraid to go to a different mentor, especially research-wise. Do not be afraid to change labs, change research groups, change professors. Because the first experience that you have may not be positive. You may think, oh my gosh, I could never do research. This is the most horrible thing. But you try a second experience, and then you're like, wait, this is like the best thing ever. And it may just be the research topic. I know several students who have done, you know, one research group, and they were like, yeah, I don't know about this. And then they found the right fit for them, and then they were like rock stars and loved it so much they went to graduate school. I mean, it's really about giving it a second chance, okay? So if you have a bad first experience, try again.
Okay, we're just about out of time, so I'm just going to run through the last few points here. So what happens if you've got a faculty mentor and you feel like they're not supportive of either collaboration with other faculty members or working outside of your department in some kind of a multidisciplinary project, or pursuing conference travel or funding opportunities? These are all kind of specific examples of things where students came to us and said basically that I really want to go and do X, but the faculty mentor is telling me that that's a bad idea. And in general, I would just stress to you that if you've got a good relationship with that faculty mentor and you're communicating well, then you should be able to make a judgment as to whether their concerns about whatever it is you want to do are valid and you should trust that, or if it's something where for whatever reason it's not a good situation and you feel like you need to pursue another option. But it ultimately boils down to you. You're the one that's going to have to make the decision in navigating a situation like these. And again, you do have your program resources available to you a lot of times. And then the graduate students and other undergraduates that have maybe gone through the same things that you have. And so if you have questions, just ask and collect as much information as you can as you try to navigate those situations. But there's no perfect resolution to some of these things. But the biggest thing is I wanted to make sure that we got you guys thinking about all of this, because a lot of it is if you can just take the shock factor out of it, it's not the first time you've thought through some of these situations, it's easier to kind of handle them on the fly. So,
and if you're not part of a structured program, there is the Center for Undergraduate Research here at Texas Tech, and they will talk to anybody who comes in that if you're doing undergraduate research and you're not part of their program, they don't care. They will meet with you, and they can help you to navigate some of these things. You know, you can tell them the situation. They're not going to run and tell anybody. They're going to say, okay, let's sit back. What was the context? What was this? What was that? What's the history? And then give you some ideas of, why don't you go talk to so-and-so? Why don't you do this? Why don't you try that? Let's do this. And even though you're not one of their students, they're serving the university, okay? So know that that's at your disposal. If you don't feel comfortable, if you're in a structured program, you don't feel comfortable going to the people that run your program, you can always go to the center. And if you're not in a structured program, you're just doing undergraduate research on your own, then please utilize the Center for Undergraduate Research, because they're here to serve the entire undergraduate researching community at Texas Tech, not just the students that belong to their particular scholars program. Okay?
If you're interested in more information about the Center for Undergraduate Research, they've got a department email address that you can send a message to. It's just CUR, C-U-R, @ttu.edu. And that address routes to their staff, and they'd be happy to meet with you and talk through anything you've got questions about the general research process or any of these kinds of things. And they are one of the sponsors for tonight. Dr. Canas and I are both actually on their advisory council. And so we're strong advocates for all the resources that they provide to the entire university. And so please do keep them in mind. We're out of time. Are there any questions before we turn you all loose?
Comments, concerns? Was this helpful? Because this is the first time that we're doing this. We did one last night, the exact same thing. So was this helpful at all? Yes, I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Okay. We probably were going to be sending out, I think, an evaluation by email. So if you'll please, give us your comments and whatever, so that we can help to improve this, because I think we'll probably end up trying to offer this every year, if not every semester, for undergraduates in general. Because this training kind of came out of discussions with faculty members and realizing a lot of complaints from them was like, well, my students don't show up on time, and my students don't do this, and blah, and like thinking, well, I think the students need to be trained on how to be mentored, which sounds weird, but we went to a meeting recently, and there was another university, several universities were like, yeah, we've started training the students on how to be mentored. And I think that it benefits you, because we tell you things on how to, the tips on how to get in to your professor and how to deal with them, and to realize that we are really busy people, but that we'll make the time for you. So I hope it was worth your time and useful.